people are arguing now is kind of an extension of that, where the Israelis are saying the threat is still existential. It's still out there. We haven't overthrown the Iranian regime. We have to attack again. And so the Russians are saying, okay, we're out of here. And then the Americans are saying, we're going to shut down these bases. We don't really need them anyway, and we want to get our people out of the region. I don't know. I'm speculating. I have no idea if that's true.
One last topic, and plus whatever people in the chat. I mean, it is Friday, so, but we always answer all the questions. I wanted to throw this one at you because I thought it was cool. University of Bern has a new study out where basically they have a theory for how life developed on Earth. Apparently, up until 4 billion years ago, the proto-Earth was just a dry rock, incapable of supporting life. Then another protoplanet, about the size of Mars now, they call it Theia, smashed into the Earth, and it delivered hydrogen, carbon, and sulfur from outside of the solar system. They're analyzing meteorite isotopes and manganese to chromium decay timelines from the first 15 million years of Earth's formation, right? Like the universe is about 17.6.
A raid across America, mostly stealing defense secrets. So why hasn't the FBI gone after them? And assuming that Epstein was an Israeli operation, that would account for the fact that they've tried to keep this quiet, because they would have to protect the FBI from people like you or me accusing the FBI of being asleep at the switch. I think that's what it is.
So would you say that's the bigger story then? Because one thing we also know is the media, at least, oftentimes tends to fixate on all the wrong details when it comes to this stuff. And I know it's a different situation, but I often think about, Iraq and the weapons of mass destruction narrative that was kind of really hammered in the media, going after, very specific details of like, what were these weapons, what were these, and then later on it comes out, okay, that wasn't even the right detail to focus on. There were no WMDs. And now the question becomes, so the bigger question that the media at least was missing was, how come this was even happening? Why was the justification for war being made, and what was the purpose of it? So it's this example of we're missing that bigger story. Mm-hmm. Would you say Israel is that bigger story in this situation?
I would. I've been speaking out over the last 6 to 12 months, I guess, about the fact that the Israelis spy on the United States. And I've been speaking out in favor of Palestinian human rights. There's a terrorist attack against you. Okay. People don't want to see terrorist attacks against anybody, but you can't have as your policy to go in and kill everybody, or to push out everybody and kill women and children and elderly and sick people and blow up hospitals and ignore human rights and murder UN workers and murder journalists. That can't be the policy. So I've been accused of being, and in the meantime, three of the FBI agents involved in my case have reached out to either me personally or to my attorneys
to apologize for what they did.
Why did the Israelis get to be hostages and the Palestinians are prisoners? They haven't been convicted of anything. I was talking to a doctor recently, an Israeli doctor who's a human rights activist, and he told me that in prison now, Palestinians are not allowed to
speak,
number one, and they're not allowed to walk. They have to go from place to place, like to the food hall or whatever, on
all fours.
And it's just to cow them. So that's where do you even begin? There's so many different things we could talk about relative to torture and things that we know are wrong
because we're signatories
to these international conventions that ban degrading and inhumane treatment.
And then we just pretend it doesn't happen
when we know it happens. So I don't get the double standard. I've never understood the double standard. And this is not a partisan issue, because the Democrats and the Republicans are
equally guilty of doing exactly this.
But from that day on, I was invited to every Italian dinner, every Italian party, the Super Bowl party. We sat together in the cafeteria. We sat together in the yard. I was one of the Italians.
It got to the point at the very end. It was my last week in prison. And my bunkmate had
Been the mayor of Cleveland. Huh?
he was an awesome guy.
A billion years old or something like that. So this is a drop in the bucket, right? But basically, they find that there's a strong case that all of the stuff that's in the earth would never have been here if not for this sort of cataclysmic, catastrophe at one point in our astronomical history. I don't know. I think it's really cool. I think astrophysics is really cool.
I missed this whole story until you sent it to me, and I thought it was absolutely fascinating. I said, nice to meet you. What did he say to you? He said, nice to meet you too. Oh yeah? Well, after you walked out, he called a number in Pakistan, and they told him to kill you. I said, get the fuck out of here. I could kill this guy with my thumb. No, don't do that. We've been looking for a reason to transfer him out. I'm like, okay. So every time I see this guy, I give him the stink eye, right? And then he gives me the stink eye back. But then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, that doesn't make any sense. He's Kurdish. He only speaks Arabic and Kurdish. Why would he call a number in Pakistan when they don't speak Arabic in Pakistan? That just didn't make sense. So I saw him in the yard, and I went up to him, and he got kind of scared, like he was going to try to defend himself. So I've been accused of being a noted anti-Semite. I saw that 2 weeks ago. I actually laughed out loud when I saw it. I'm a noted anti-Semite. And then in a comment, actually it was on that viral clip that you're talking about, somebody called me very simply, flat out, a Jew hater. Well, no, number one. Number two, I'm going to work against anybody who is spying on my country. Anybody. Now, there was a case in the 1980s where a Greek American by the name of Stephen Lallas was spying for the Greek government. Stephen Lallas deserved to die in prison.
He was an awesome guy. He just died recently. And he comes back from the medical unit. He had to go down there every day for insulin. And he says, John, there's a guy down in medical talking about you.
And saying you were a rat.
I go, what? A rat? I mean, this is...
Blood's gonna be spilled.
I said, who is this guy? He said, I never saw him before. He must have just arrived.
He's got tattoos all over him.
I said, Frank, point this guy out to me. I want to know who this is. The next morning, I get up, I go to breakfast, and another guy that I was friendly with, I used to play racquetball with him. He says, hey, man, there's a guy
saying you're a rat.
I said, what? I said, Frank just told me last night some guy was saying I'm a rat. I said, Clint, point him out to me. I want to know who this is. So at lunch, they point him out. And I'm like, I don't have any idea who that guy is. And one of the Italians says, he just got off the bus. He just arrived here but a couple of days ago. And I go,
hey! I shouted at him.
He was in the line for food. I was already at the table, the Italian table. I said, you have a problem with me? He goes, you know what I said. I said,
come on over here and let's fix it.
He goes, after dinner in the yard. And I stood up and I said,
fuck that.
Right now. The only place in the entire prison where the guards feel at risk is in the cafeteria because you got 1,000 guys.
And 6 guards.
So at the first sign of trouble, they hit the panic button. And then every guard in the prison comes and they start cracking heads. So the Banano boss is sitting next to me and he pulls my shirt and he says,
sit the fuck down, please.
But I was going to beat him right there in the cafeteria in front of everybody. Pete says, sit the fuck down, calm down. Try to defend himself. And I had, 6 inches and 100 pounds on this guy. So I said, wait a minute. I just want to ask you a question. Did the cops say anything to you about me? And he said, yeah. I said, what did they say to you? And he said, they told me that after we met, you called a number in Washington and they told you to kill me. And I said, oh, they did they? So I went back to the law library and I looked this up, and this was a Class D felony. It was conspiring to commit violence in a federal facility. It's punishable by up to 5 years in prison. So I wrote it in my letter and I sent it to my attorney, and I didn't give it a second thought. I didn't know my attorney was friends with Arianna Huffington, who then put it on Huffington Post with this banner headline, millions of hits. The next thing I know, Jake Tapper drives to the prison to interview me, and it's everywhere from CNN to Playboy to The Economist and Time Magazine, when Time Magazine was a thing, and NPR's calling the prison to interview me, and the next thing I know, I'm called to the warden's office. Well, that's in an off-limits part of the facility. So the warden calls me in. He's like, I'm going to send you to solitary right now. And I thought, is now the time to be humble before the warden, or should I stake my claim? And I said, Warden, with all due respect, I've gone nose to nose with Al-Qaeda, with Hezbollah, with the Iranians, and you want me to be afraid of you? Give me some credit. He said, yeah, we'll see what you say when you've spent some time in solitary. I said, I've lived in Yemen, in Pakistan. I'm not afraid of your Loretto, Pennsylvania solitary. Besides, I said, go ahead and send me to solitary. CNN's going to be waiting for you next to your car in the parking lot. And I just looked at him. I never went to solitary.
He didn't. He was released. He moved to Greece. He became a Greek citizen. He's a big hero over there. But anybody spying against the United States deserves the worst that the judicial system can throw at him. And the Israelis are spying on the United States.
And on the topic of, spying and intelligence, I think this is also something no one can really even answer. And it's this long-standing belief that US intelligence can't fully disentangle its priorities from Israel's.
Right.
From your experience, is there a structural dependency that's built into this relationship? Is there something bigger here?
Yes.
Something deeper?
Yes. And it started in 1969 when Richard Nixon said that the U.S. would protect Israel under any circumstances. Our foreign policy changed in 1969 to guarantee Israel's safety and security. That was also about the same time that AIPAC became a major force in American politics. AIPAC has been around since the 50s. And from the 50s to 1969, 1970, 71, it would make, campaign donations to this candidate or that candidate and, would put out position papers, whatever, just like every other lobbying group. But now it's like a country in and of itself. And if you don't toe the line, the Israeli line, and
I'll take care of it. I said, well, what's that supposed to mean?
He says, it means I'll take the fuck care of it.
I said, okay, all right. He said, now go back to my cell and read the paper. I go, okay, I trust you. So I went back to his cell and I'm reading the USA Today. And he comes back like 20 minutes later and he goes,
it's done. Huh?
I said, what's done? He goes, it's taken care of, like this. I go, well, what's that supposed to mean? He said, it means it's taken care of. You don't have to worry about it. I was like, okay. So I go back across the hall to my cell. I'm sitting there. Like another 20, 30 minutes pass. And again, out of my peripheral vision, I see movement. I turn, and it's the guy. He's got like a fat lip. His eye is swollen. And I'm looking at him like, and he goes, I wanted to apologize for calling you a rat. I didn't know about your prominence in the Italian community. And I'm looking at him, like not knowing what to say. Like, I wanted to say, oh, no, I didn't mean for you to get...
you're asking...
And I said, next time...
You're fucking dead.
You understand? I'm sorry. And then he runs away. And I look at Pete. I said, thank you. He says, no problem.
Nice.
And that was it. Never had any trouble.
When I first got to the prison, you talked about how bad the food was.
like criminally bad, where it's actually marked on the boxes, not for human consumption, feed use only, and then they're slapping it on the plates in the name of counterterrorism. But then there was another ISI made up of people with long beards who gave you a dirty look when you were walking the halls there. These were the members of ISI who had created these Kashmiri terrorist groups or Jaish-e-Mohammed, or other groups that were blowing up Shia Muslim mosques and were attacking Americans. So we did not have rose-colored glasses on at the time, thinking that everybody in ISI is wonderful because our relationship with the counterterrorism units was wonderful.
You're right.
It was far more complicated than that. And it was Nick Fuentes. I said, well, of course it was Nick Fuentes, because everything he says is stupid and backward, and I'm not going to take any advice from a 20-year-old incel. How these guys are able to thrust their ideology on the rest of the country is a mystery to me. So number one, ignore them. I somehow found myself in a 1 day long feud with Nick Fuentes last week. I never responded to him, which is why it went away. But he was calling me out because I wouldn't debate Zeno, I don't know what the fuck this guy's name was. One of these Twitch streamers. I don't know who these people are. I don't know why anybody thinks they're important, but no, I'm not engaging them because of this manosphere thing, because of this stupid trad wife propaganda. I totally agree with you. Craziest thing. Anyway, he said he wanted me to listen to this video, and the person on the video was saying, Lord of the Rings, oh my God, what a terrible show. Terrible, pointless, a bunch of little guys running around, midgets, orcs, whatever. And he says, it was such a gay movie. It was gay. And then he says, Goodfellas, gay.